The apron felt wrong. It was a deep, earthy brown, embroidered with the golden logo of Morning Ritual, a company I owned but had never truly understood. The fabric was starchy and unfamiliar against my clothes. My name tag, crudely written in permanent marker, read Leo. It was a lie, of course. My real name is Alex Sterling, and I wasn't there to learn how to make coffee. I was there to see how my father's legacy was being systematically destroyed, one watered-down latte at a time. The man assigned to train me, Frank, a wiry guy in his late 40s with a cynical glint in his eyes, leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and cigarettes. "All right, Leo," he said, his voice a low conspiratorial whisper. "Forget everything you saw in those corporate training videos. I'm going to show you how we really do things around here." He then picked up a stainless steel milk pitcher, but instead of putting it back on its rack, he just rinsed it under the tap for 2 seconds. No soap, no sanitizer, and put it right back on the espresso machine. "This," he announced with a proud smirk, "is what I call the 5-second plus tax rule. It looks clean, the customer thinks it's clean, and you save about a minute of your life. And in this business, Leo, time is money. Corporate doesn't care about clean, they care about fast." My stomach turned. That pitcher, a specific model my father had sourced from Italy, was supposed to be sanitized after every single use. It was rule number 1 in his handbook. Frank just winked at me, completely oblivious to the fact that he was confessing his sins to the one person on earth who could bring the entire temple down on his head. Before we go any further into this, I'm curious to know where you're all watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. I'd love to see how far this story travels. And hey, if you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button for tomorrow's video. You won't want to miss it. My journey into this deception started a month earlier, in a sterile boardroom that felt more like a mausoleum. My father, Richard Sterling, had passed away 6 months prior, leaving me, his only son, the sole inheritor of Morning Ritual, a national chain of high-end coffee houses he'd built from a single shop in Seattle. I was 26, fresh out of business school with a head full of theories and a heart full of grief. I'd spent my life watching my dad obsess over every detail of his company. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a craftsman. He called his coffee beans his children, and could spend an hour explaining why a water temperature of 201 degrees Fahrenheit produced a more robust flavor than 203. He believed that a cup of coffee wasn't just a transaction, it was a moment of peace, a ritual to start one's day. That was the brand's promise. But the numbers told a different story. Since his passing, profits were up, way up. A staggering 15% quarter-over-quarter. Marcus Thorne, my father's longtime COO, and the man now running the day-to-day operations, presented the figures with a triumphant smile. He was a slick, impeccably dressed man who spoke in a language of spreadsheets and profit margins. "Your father, God rest his soul, was a visionary, Alex," Marcus had said, clapping me on the shoulder. "But he was an artist. Not always the most practical. We've implemented a few efficiency initiatives that have streamlined our processes. Cutting waste, optimizing workflow. The market is responding beautifully." It sounded good. It sounded like what I was supposed to want to hear. But it felt hollow. My dad's philosophy was never about efficiency. It was about excellence. At the same time, customer complaints online were skyrocketing. The reviews were brutal. "Used to be the best coffee in the city. Now it tastes like bitter mud. My favorite barista is gone, and the new staff seems miserable. Paid $7 for a lukewarm cup of disappointment." It was a paradox. Profits were soaring while the customer experience was plummeting. Marcus brushed it off as a vocal minority and the cost of scaling up. But I had a gnawing suspicion that something was fundamentally broken. So, I decided to see for myself. I created a fake identity, Leo, a guy looking for a fresh start, and applied for a barista position at one of our flagship stores in the city, a store that, according to Marcus's data, was one of the most profitable. I wanted to see the efficiency initiatives in action. I wanted to see what we were sacrificing at the altar of profit. And that's how I ended up with Frank and his 5-second plus tax rule. The next lesson was even worse. He took me to the back room, where bags of our signature Serenity Blend coffee beans were stored. My father used to fly to Colombia to select these beans himself. They were supposed to be used within 10 days of roasting for peak freshness. Frank pointed to a bag with a date stamped on it from 6 weeks ago. "Corporate says toss these," he said, shaking his head in mock pity. "Such a waste. You know what we do?" He grabbed a large, empty bin. "We mix 'em. 1 part fresh beans, 3 parts old ones. Nobody can tell the difference once it's drowned in milk and syrup. He scooped up the old, dull-looking beans and dumped them into the hopper of the main grinder. It's called margin preservation, kid. Every bag we save is pure profit for the suits. I felt a wave of nausea. I could almost hear my father's voice in my head, passionately explaining how the oils in coffee beans degrade over time, creating a rancid, bitter taste. He would have considered this a sacrilege. My first few days were a masterclass in corporate sabotage, taught by a man who thought he was gaming the system, but was really just a pawn in a much larger, more cynical game. He showed me how to water down the cold brew concentrate by an extra 20%, how to calibrate the automatic espresso machines to use fewer grams of coffee per shot, and how to stretch the milk by steaming it to a bubbly foam, which adds volume but creates a terrible texture. Every corner that could be cut, Frank had found a way to not just cut it, but to bulldoze right through it. But the most disturbing part was his attitude. He wasn't just lazy, he was resentful. He saw the company as a faceless entity that was exploiting him, and this was his way of fighting back. "You see that sign?" he said one afternoon, pointing to a large, beautifully framed photo of my father on the wall, a quote underneath it reading, "Quality is the soul of our business." That's old-world nonsense. The old man was a nice guy, but he didn't live in the real world. Now it's all about the numbers. Thorne, the big shot downtown, he sends out these memos every week. Reduce waste by 5%. Decrease service time by 10 seconds. He doesn't tell you how. He just expects it. So this is how. We give him his numbers, and they leave us alone. It was then I realized Frank wasn't the disease. He was a symptom. The real problem was Marcus Thorne. My father's most trusted lieutenant was the one sending down the pressure, creating this toxic culture of cutting corners, all while assuring me that my father's legacy was in safe hands. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Amidst the cynicism, however, there was a small glimmer of hope. Her name was Sarah. She was a young barista, probably a college student, with bright eyes and a quiet determination. She moved with a grace and precision that stood in stark contrast to Frank's sloppy shortcuts. I noticed she would often linger after her shift, meticulously cleaning the steam wands Frank had ignored, or secretly making a perfect pour-over for a regular customer she knew appreciated it, using beans from a small, personal stash she kept hidden under the counter. One day, I saw Frank berating her. "Sarah, what is this? I saw you use a whole new carton of milk for that one latte. You could have used the one that's been open for 3 days. Do you know how much that costs?" Sarah stood her ground, her voice trembling slightly. "It smelled off, Frank. And the date was yesterday. You're supposed to do what I tell you," he snapped. "I'm the shift lead. Stop wasting product, or I'll be having a word with management about your hours." She shrank back, her face pale. Later, I found her in the break room, her eyes red. I sat down next to her, offering her a bottle of water. "Hey," I said gently, staying in my Leo character. "He's a piece of work, isn't he?" She gave a weak, watery laugh. "You have no idea. It wasn't always like this. When Mr. Sterling was alive, it felt different. It felt like we were part of something special. He used to visit, you know. He knew all our names. He'd taste the coffee and tell you if the grind was just a little too coarse. He cared." Her voice cracked. "Now it's just this." She gestured vaguely at the wall, at the whole building. "This was my opening. What changed?" I asked, trying to sound like a curious newcomer. "Everything changed when he passed," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The new guy, Mr. Thorne, he started sending out all these new rules. These efficiency memos. It's all about speed and cost. He cut our staffing, so we're always rushed. He changed our suppliers for milk and syrups to cheaper brands. And he pressures our manager, who pressures Frank, who pressures us. It's a chain of misery." She looked at me, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Please don't tell Frank I said any of this." "I won't," I promised, my heart aching for her, for the other employees like her, and for the memory of my father. "Your secret's safe with me." She told me about the memos, how they were posted for a day, and then had to be shredded, almost as if Marcus knew his directives were shameful. But she, clever Sarah, had taken photos of a few of them on her phone before they were destroyed. She was afraid of losing her job, but she was more afraid of what the job was becoming. The final straw, the incident that propelled me from silent observer to avenging son, happened on a busy Saturday morning. The line was out the door. Frank was in his element, barking orders, sloshing drinks together with reckless abandon. A woman came to the counter with her young daughter, who looked about 6 or 7. "Hi," the woman said. "I have a question. My daughter has a severe nut allergy. Is your caramel syrup nut-free? And do you use separate pitchers for almond milk?" It was a critical question, one my father had drilled into his staff. Our protocol was crystal clear. Use a dedicated, purple-colored pitcher for all alternative milks to prevent cross-contamination, and all our primary syrups were certified nut-free. I saw Sarah reach for the purple pitcher, but Frank intercepted her. "I got this," he said, waving her away. He grabbed the nearest pitcher, one he'd just used for almond milk and given his patented 5-second plus tax rinse. He didn't even change his gloves. He quickly made the drink and handed it over with a fake, charming smile. My blood ran cold. I opened my mouth to say something, to scream, to stop them, but I was frozen. I was Leo, the trainee. What could I do without blowing my cover? I watched them walk away, the little girl happily sipping her potentially lethal drink. I felt utterly powerless. For the next hour, I was on edge, expecting to hear sirens, expecting the worst. Thankfully, nothing happened. Maybe the residue wasn't enough to trigger a reaction. Maybe it was just luck. But that luck was a ticking time bomb. It wasn't a matter of if a tragedy would happen, but when. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that little girl, so trusting, and Frank's careless disregard for her safety, played on a loop in my mind. This wasn't just about bad coffee anymore. This was about endangering lives. Marcus Thorne, with his obsession with spreadsheets and decimal points, had created a system that was not just immoral, but dangerous. His efficiency initiatives were going to get someone killed. The next day, I approached Sarah again. I told her I was deeply disturbed by what I saw and that I wanted to do something about it. I confessed that I had a friend who was a journalist and was looking for a story on corporate negligence. It was a lie, but I needed to see those memos she'd mentioned. Seeing the fire in my eyes, the same fire she felt, she finally relented. She texted me the photos. They were even more damning than I had imagined. Effective immediately, all waste product, including coffee beans past the 7-day freshness window, is to be integrated into daily stock at a 3-to-1 ratio. Sanitization cycles are to be deprioritized during peak hours to improve customer throughput. Staffing levels will be adjusted to the lean model to maximize labor efficiency. It was signed at the bottom of each one, _Marcus Thorne, COO_. He had signed his own death warrant. I had everything I needed. The time for observation was over. It was time for a reckoning. I spent the next 48 hours setting the stage. I called an emergency, mandatory, Q3 strategic review meeting at the corporate headquarters. I had my assistant invite the entire senior leadership team, all the regional managers, and of course Marcus Thorne. I also made sure that the manager of the store where I'd been working, a nervous, sweaty man who was clearly complicit in Frank's regime, was on the attendee list. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday morning in the main boardroom, the very room where Marcus had assured me everything was fine. On Wednesday morning, I didn't put on my suit. I put on my barista uniform one last time. The brown apron, the cheap non-slip shoes, and the name tag that said Leo. I walked into our gleaming corporate tower, earning more than a few strange looks from the executives in their $1,000 suits. I went straight to the boardroom. It was a magnificent room, with a long mahogany table and a panoramic view of the city skyline. My father had designed it to be a place of inspiration and bold ideas. I stood at the head of the table, by the main presentation screen, and waited. One by one, the managers and executives filed in. They stared at me, some with pity, some with annoyance, assuming I was a coffee boy who had wandered into the wrong room. My store manager saw me, and his face went white with confusion and panic. Then Marcus Thorne strode in, looking confident and powerful. He saw me and chuckled, shaking his head. "Son, I think you're on the wrong floor. The catering entrance is in the basement." I just looked at him and said nothing. I let them all settle, the whispers and snickers filling the air. Marcus, clearly impatient, took his seat at the head of the table opposite me. "All right, let's get started. I'm not sure why this meeting was called on such short notice, but let's be efficient. Alex couldn't make it today, it seems, so I'll be leading the discussion." That was my cue. I cleared my throat. The room fell silent, intrigued by the audacity of the barista who was about to speak. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. My name is Leo. For the past 2 weeks, I've been working as a trainee barista at our downtown flagship store. And I'm here today to talk about efficiency. Marcus's smile tightened. He looked irritated. This is highly irregular. Security. Let him speak, said a voice from the side. It was Eleanor Vance, the head of marketing, a woman who had worked with my father for 20 years and who looked increasingly troubled by the company's direction. I nodded at her gratefully. I was trained by a man named Frank, I continued, my eyes locked on Marcus. Frank taught me a lot. He taught me that sanitizing a milk pitcher is a waste of time. He taught me that coffee beans that are 6 weeks old are perfectly fine to serve to our customers, as long as you mix them with a few fresh ones. He taught me how to water down the cold brew, how to short the espresso shots, and how to create the illusion of quality while cutting every conceivable corner. The room was dead silent now. The regional managers were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. My store manager looked like he was about to faint. But the most important lesson Frank taught me, I said, my voice rising with controlled anger, was about a little girl with a severe nut allergy. He taught me that her safety was less important than saving 30 seconds by not grabbing the correct, non-contaminated pitcher. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I learned that our brand's promise of quality and care is a lie. A dangerous lie. Marcus finally exploded. This is absurd. This is slander. This disgruntled employee is inventing fantasies. I've had enough. Someone get him out of here. He stood up, his face red with fury. You're right about one thing, Marcus, I said calmly, as I reached up and slowly, deliberately, took off my hat and my glasses. I looked around the room, meeting the shocked eyes of the executives who knew me. I let my gaze finally rest on Marcus, whose face had drained of all color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. It is absurd, I said, my voice dropping to a steely tone. It's absurd that the man my father trusted with his life's work would betray him so completely. The problem, Marcus, is that you've been so busy looking at spreadsheets, you forgot who owns the name on them. My name is Alex Sterling, and this is my company. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Marcus stumbled back into his chair as if I'd punched him. You fed me lies about efficiency and streamlining. I went on, walking slowly down the side of the table towards him. But I have the truth. I clicked a remote, and the large screen behind me lit up. The first of Sarah's photos appeared, the memo about using expired beans. Click. The memo about deprioritizing sanitation. Click. The memo about the lean staffing model. At the bottom of each one, his signature was clear as day. Marcus Thorne, COO, You created a culture of fear and deception, I said, my voice resonating with the authority he had so badly underestimated. You squeezed your employees until they were forced to break the very rules that this company was built on. You didn't just cut corners, Marcus. You gutted the soul of this company for a few extra percentage points on a quarterly report. You endangered customers. You dishonored my father's memory. I stood directly in front of him now. He was trembling, unable to meet my eyes. You're fired, Marcus, I said, the words tasting like justice. Effective immediately. Security, I said, looking at the 2 guards who had just entered the room. Would you please escort Mr. Thorne off the premises? He'll need to collect his personal belongings from his office. Nothing else. The guards moved in. Marcus, utterly defeated, didn't even protest. He allowed them to lead him out of the room, a broken man. I then turned my attention to the pale-faced store manager. You knew what was happening in your store. You enabled it. You're fired too. All of you, I said, sweeping my gaze across the regional managers. This is your one and only warning. The culture of cutting corners ends today. We're going back to the principles this company was founded on. We will be a company that our employees are proud to work for and that our customers can trust. Anyone who doesn't believe in that mission can collect their severance package on the way out. The fallout was swift and decisive. In the days that followed, I cleaned house. Any manager who was found to be knowingly enforcing Thorne's toxic policies was let go. It was a painful, surgical process, but a necessary one. I also had to deal with Frank. I called him into the now empty manager's office at the store. He swaggered in, assuming he was getting a promotion for being such a good trainer. He saw me sitting behind the desk, not in my apron, but in a tailored suit. His bravado vanished instantly. Leo, well, what are you doing here? My name is Alex Sterling, I said quietly, and I own this company. Frank's face went through a dozen emotions in a few seconds. Confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally resignation. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture him. I just told him what I saw and how it made me feel. I told him about the little girl. For the first time, a crack appeared in his cynical armor. He looked ashamed. Look, he stammered. The pressure from up top, it was insane. It was either cut corners or lose my job. I understand the pressure, Frank, I said. But you had a choice. Every time you chose the easy way, the wrong way. You chose to put people at risk. I can't have that in my company. You're fired. I did offer him a severance package, twice what was required. I told him to use the time to think about the kind of man he wanted to be. He took it and left without another word. It wasn't a happy ending for him, but it was a just one. My next, and most important, act was to find Sarah. I found her nervously wiping down a counter, expecting the worst now that her manager was gone. I walked up to her. Sarah, I said. She jumped, startled. Leo. Mr. Sterling. Sir. I'm so sorry. Sarah, I interrupted gently. You were the only one who remembered what this company is supposed to be about. You were the only one who was brave enough to do the right thing when no one was watching. That's the kind of person I want to build this company around. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, I said with a smile. I'm about to give you a lot more work. How would you like to be the new manager of this store? And I'm also creating a new position, National Training and Quality Assurance Lead. The job will involve traveling to our stores and re-implementing the training programs my father originally designed. The ones based on quality, care, and respect. The job is yours if you want it. Her jaw dropped. The tears now flowed freely, but they were tears of joy. She accepted without hesitation. In that moment, watching the hope return to her face, I felt like I was finally doing right by my father. The profits might dip for a while. The stock market might not like it. But for the first time since he died, I felt the soul of morning ritual coming back to life. It would be a long, hard road to undo the damage and rebuild the trust we had lost. But as I looked around the coffee shop, this time as its rightful owner and guardian, I knew it was a journey worth taking. My father's legacy was safe. If you enjoyed the story, I'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button and join me for the next one. Thanks for listening.